present themselves as being virtuous. Most of them say that they do not act on their attraction to children. They split from Before You Act about 4 years ago. So in the course of a little over 4 years, they have grown to over about 1,800 members, most of whom are sexually attracted to children. There are a number of mental health professionals, researchers, James Cantor and a few folks are on the site as well. But I think it's phenomenal the way it's grown, and I mentioned earlier that I think it's because of the stand that they take. So the bottom line for virtuous pedophiles is sexual interaction between an adult and a child is wrong. They don't argue about it, they don't discuss it. They do have some fights with those who do think that it might be okay under certain circumstances or in a different society or whatever. So there is another group that I've learned to respect and appreciate, and that's besides Before You Act. Before You Act doesn't take a stand, but most of the people are against it, or they don't do it. Before You Act, think twice and don't do it. Before You Act applies to both the therapist and the minor attracted person. So if you're a therapist, before you act and discriminate against the pedophile, think twice. But anyway, the other group is Visions of Alice, and I invited them to live stream, so if any of them are listening in today, I want to give you a kudos to Visions of Alice, which is directly more people who would think that it's okay under certain circumstances if society were different. But they don't act on it necessarily any more than the other people. So they're as virtuous as the virtuous pedophiles in the sense that even though they wish the laws would change, they still respect the fact that we do have laws and they're not going to abuse a child. And in fact, they have given me support with ASAP. One of the moderators there offered to pay for therapy. Nobody's taken them up on it yet. But they have provided that, so I appreciate that. VRPED, no adult-child sex, so that's the bottom line. No illegal activity, so I'm talking about on the site itself. So there's no discussion of illegal activities, primarily to protect those from getting the attention of law enforcement agencies, and then they come into virtuous pedophiles and find out all the pedophiles and go around and kill them all or send them off to Siberia. So they just don't discuss non-adjudicated offenses. I think I mentioned that we do interact other ways. They might call me, they might personal message me, they might email me. Email is a little bit risky to say anything, but anyway, a number of them have shared some of their real life issues that they've struggled with. Females too, as well as the males. There's probably couple dozen females. We'll do that in a minute. So there's no illegal discussion. Somebody talked about going to websites, pornography websites. They don't allow that. Any links to things like that. No political agenda. So this is virtuous pedophiles. We're not trying to change the law, the age of consent. The demographics, mostly male, as you might expect. Mostly young adults. Now, they have a rule that you have to be 18 to be on virtuous pedophiles, but there's no way to enforce that. So some of the people, personal message me, have said that they are younger, 17 or whatever. The idea is several reasons. First of all, if you're talking about sex to kids, you can get in trouble for corrupting a minor or whatever. Second, there are some offenders on there who might be at risk from their probation officer because they're interacting with minors. So we're careful about that. But there are many young adults, and there are other places they can go. This American Life was a program put together by a reporter about a young man named Adam who has another site just for underage teenagers who are struggling with pedophilia. But most of the ones on VRPED are in their 20s, 18, 19, 20s. Only a few of us old folks. There's a few here. Most of them are English speaking. not necessarily as their first language. So for a while there were a lot of, like maybe people from South America, Spanish people.
We have a question.
Questions?
You said there were some females. Do you have any idea how many?
There's about 24 now, I think. I haven't counted them, and they come and go. Somebody mentioned Anton, or however you say his name. Schweighofer from Canada. He offered to be my mentor, and about that time, didn't work out, we didn't do that, but about that time he had a female pedophile, non-offending pedophile, and he sent her to FERPED, and it's like there weren't any other women. Well, what happens is you got to have a certain number of people to make a site happen. In fact, I started another forum with ASAP, and it just didn't take off. Well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Virtuous Pedophiles has taken off, but they've had women's only group, and there's not enough to make it viable. But they participate with the men, so we're not sexist. They just are part of our family. And there are quite a few wives and spouses and significant others and related people, parents who participate. It is an American base, so most of the people are from America, although it's international. There's Iran, Israel, Kiwi, South Australia, South America. Anyway, Kyrgyzstan. Most of them are married, educated, employed, and religious as their counterparts would be in society. They present themselves as non-offending pedophiles. So Ethan and Nick, who run the Virtuous Pedophiles, one time I talked to them about some of the things that people had shared with me, that they had actually done something. And I was like, no, Gary, nobody's done anything. Well, I mean, put your head out of the sand. There are going to be some people that are in denial, and there's going to be some people that have maybe done some things, but it's not really bad. And I'll just be honest with you, I don't know exactly where the line is, because the line is so nebulous. It floats around, and you can hug a child, and it's perfectly appropriate. There's nothing abusive about a hug. But I always tell Tabitha, I'm worried that maybe I hugged her too long or too tight. A normal hug can turn into a sexual hug. So that's why we use the word sexual as opposed to sex. Sex abuse, sex besides being like gender, that's an inappropriate use of the word sex, but anyway, we usually think of sex as being like intercourse, penetration, at least, digital, oral, anal, whatever. But anyway, these people present themselves as being non-offending pedophiles, and they say they're not at risk. Many of them say they're not at risk. They're very low risk of actually doing anything. I take them at their word. That may be true. Maybe it's not true. I don't know. But there are a few that admit, yeah, I'm at risk. And one guy in particular we were talking about that really, says he's struggling with it. He's kept in contact with me. In fact, this weekend he wanted to go to a gun show, so he called me up and said, what do you think? Should I go to a gun show? And Tabitha says, well, there's kids there. Can't go anywhere with these children. No, she said, there's children at Walmart, there's children wherever you go. So we told him, go to the gun show. So yesterday he called me and said, oh, I had a wonderful time at the gun show. And yes, there were kids there, but he didn't abuse any of them.
Yeah, actually, she said the idea of saying you couldn't go there because of the children there was ridiculous.
Oh, I didn't want to tell him that. Yes. Many of the people on Virtuous Pedophiles admit that they struggle with viewing inappropriate pictures of children. So I really appreciate your presentation, and we'll send them your way. Because frankly, my issue is a little different. I'm not better than other people. I'm not perfect. But I don't really struggle with pornography at all. I mean, pictures of adults or children. My issue is that I've got these pictures in my mind from the past 60 years. Every little naked girl I have ever seen. You think, oh, little girls don't run around naked? They stand there next to their mother, naked. And I'm supposed to sit there just, well, anyway. So those images come into my mind. You already said this. One size does not fit all. Do they need treatment? Not all of them need treatment. The virtuous pedophiles, okay, most of them say, we're okay, we don't have any problem with, we will never abuse, we know we won't, we're not at risk. Some of them say, hey, we got other issues, struggling with depression, suicidal ideation, we like to go to a therapist, but we'd really like to have somebody who understands pedophilia. We don't want to just deal with this side of our life and ignore this. So quite often, when I refer them, I might even call the therapist, say, you know, how do you respond to a non-offending pedophile? Or I encourage them to call. So, first of all, these people have the online group for their support. That's Virtuous Pedophiles, Before You Act, Visions of Alice, some others. They have personal support. They can call me, they can email me, they can personal message me or others. There's several on there that are very good, and that's why I invited this young man here today, because he was new on Verped. I'd never met him before, but just the way he responded, Kenneth, I'm looking at you and thanking you for the way you respond to people there. Being an offender, sometimes the virtuous pedophiles say, oh, well, that's an offender, they're totally different than us. Are they different? Are we different? Or just we haven't
I
gotten
think the only thing that separates me from most of those who have not offended is they weren't in a position where their coping mechanisms were overwhelmed. I think that's the only difference.
I agree.
They would, many of them would disagree with me that there's something wrong with my character to have made a decision like that, but they didn't walk in my shoes. They don't know what I went through before that day.
So they don't always agree with you when you make comments,
No, I don't always agree with myself.
but generally they appreciate what you say, I think. I have seen any negative, overly negative responses. Sometimes they go to therapy and they specifically need help to not offend. So, virtuous pedophiles. Yeah, we talked about suicidal ideation. So they have different polls on the forum, PHPBB forum. They can anybody can make a poll, ask a question. So these are not scientific polls, but whoever responds, so it might be, you know, a couple dozen, might be 200 or 300. 60% of those who responded, probably somewhere here I put how many did respond to that one. 257 responded to this poll. 60% had suicidal ideation in the past. 29% struggle with it in the present. As far as their attractions, 57%, and this is out of 369. Are you attracted to boys, girls, or both? 57% attracted to boys, 21%, I'm sorry, before I go on to that, let's just say 65% to girls, with the 22% overlap. I need to explain this a little bit. What is homosexuality? By definition.
Same-sex
Orientation to those of the same sex.
All right, those of the same sex. Some people use the word gay to mean an attraction to the same sex of the same age level as you are. I never read that into there, but I'm just telling you how people use it. They separate. If you're attracted to boys, that's different than being attracted to men. And even on virtuous pedophiles, a lot of the people in this 57% attracted to boys don't identify as gay. Does that make sense? You understand the difference? So, in fact, they might consider themselves heterosexual in their telephilia, in their adult age attraction. They may be married. Again, they're married, happily married, got children. He's into boys. So there's a little difference. There's an overlap. You say more than half attracted to boys. Well, it's 57, 65 to girls. So 22% are attracted to both boys and girls. I was surprised. We could draw some conclusions about that. I was surprised how high the boys were. However you cut it, We might get back to that again later. I think we'll move on for now. Did you have a question?
More of a comment. My understanding was that it's more of the attraction to the frame of the body as opposed to the gender of the individual. And the way that it was explained to me was little boys and little girls.
Are very much alike.
Exactly. You put a little boy in a dress, right? And you wouldn't necessarily be able to know the genitalia. Same thing with putting a little girl in, more gender specific towards male. You would be able to know the gender.
Yes. I find myself attracted to cute little boys with long hair, and then they turn around and I see their penis, and no, I'm just kidding. I don't see their penis. How do I know they're a boy? Well, some other thing, I draw the conclusion that they're boy, and suddenly my attraction goes away. But you're right. They're more amorphous. So 21% are attracted to ages 10 to 12. Most people with pedophilia know the age and the gender of their attraction. So the majority, 10 to 12, and then it kind of fans out a bell curve out from there. So other 80% have other fetishes. That would be maybe panty fetish or whatever you call it, foot fetish, into dogs, animals, zoophilia. 72% said that they had at one time been in love with a child. Some have an emotional attraction, some have a sexual attraction, some have both. Pedophilia, this is in regard to their attitudes. Pedophilia is not molestation. Not all pedophiles are molesters. I think we've already covered this, so we'll move right through this. You already know that attraction is different than action. They're not all just ticking time bombs waiting to abuse kids. The farmer Jones saw a little boy down by his apple tree and called out, "Johnny, are you trying to steal my apples?" And Johnny calls back, "No, Farmer Jones, I'm trying not to steal your apples." So virtuous pedophiles are actually trying not to offend, as opposed to the typical view that they're just waiting, they try to get jobs working with kids, and they're just trying to arrange situations so they can grab a child. That is not reality. That's 1%, that's a small percentage of people with pedophilia that are not sensitive to, they don't care what people think. They're sociopaths, psychopaths. They don't really care about society's mores and taboos.
Can I comment on that? I don't know the stats, but I was reading recently that most perpetrators of violent sexual acts against children are not pedophiles.
Yeah, well, that's where I mentioned my good friend, Dr. Abel, did a study, child molestation prevention research study years ago in the 80s maybe. And he says 90% are pedophiles, 90% of those who abuse. Well, now most researchers are saying about or less than 50% are actual pedophiles. Well, it depends how you define pedophiles. If it has to be an exclusive pedophile, then that cuts out a lot. If it's somebody like me who's secondary attraction, then,
What bothers me about that is that whenever we bring up the subject, that's the image that comes to people's minds. Oh, these people who kidnap children and abuse them and kill them, That's kind of the...
That is the image that's given, and that's what most of the laws are based on.
Yeah.
Actually, that is statistically insignificant.
Yeah.
There's about 115 of those kinds of situations in the United States every year. That's less than 1/10 of 1%.
Good newspaper copy.
Yes.
Yeah, I just was at another conference that they mentioned that figure that it's 100%, about 100 people a year that are actually abducted by people that are going to kill or use your child for sex offenses. But interestingly, there are also 100 kids a year that are killed by lightning. So, and yet all our laws are directed at that.
To me, does it really matter whether it's caused by pedophilia or something else, where the line is exactly drawn? I was chatting with a man who has a teenage son who did something inappropriate, and was trying to help this man deal with it. He didn't particularly want to deal with it. He said, "Don't talk to him, please." So I let it go. for the most part, but he said in this conversation, private conversation, I'm disclosing it to you, but I'm not telling you who it was. Don't tell him, I told you, no. He said, you know what? When I was a teenager, he said, I'm not attracted to kids, I'm not into that. But one time, when I was a teenager, I picked a little girl at the park, and my hand fell on her private parts. And I found myself very turned on, sexually aroused. And he said, I've never told anybody that before. It was like he wanted to get that out. It's like you want to be able to tell somebody that you can trust. So he's not a pedophile, but hey, one time, I slipped in the shower and I just ended up inside of her. But back to your excuses. So it can happen. I think it could happen to anybody. Any red-blooded American male could abuse a child. So.
Teenage boys, come on.
All right. Anybody red-blooded American girl? Any red-blooded Canadian girl? And don't think that kids aren't sexual beings either. So this other situation, they're doing training down in Medford, and so we went over to the training to protect children, and talking to one of the guys there, and he shared with me, boy, I got to be careful sharing these stories because you know what I'm talking about. He said, we were babysitting the neighbor girl, and my son, now he has lots of sons, but let's say that one son, his sons are very average short height, but one son is very tall. So the son who is very big for his age, again, a little extra power there. He approaches the neighbor girl that they're babysitting. I don't think the adults were around at that particular moment, but that happens. He says, can I kiss your pee-pee? Praise the Lord, at least he asked, right? He's got the message that you don't do it without asking, but the parents of the girl, they freaked out. Oh, you can never babysit our kids again. Well, things like that happen with kids. He's a little big. I don't know how old the girl was, but you know that he's big for his age. Where was it? How did I get up on that? I don't think he's a pedophile, but, kids, things happen. Do you deal with it? So maybe it needs to be addressed. All right, let's move on. I'm not sure where I was going with not ticking time bombs. Please refer, don't abandon. I guess that's from me, my personal experience. Helping people with pedophilia will help prevent child sexual abuse. Yes, that's why. Why do we try to help pedophiles? We need to help protect the kids. Well, we can protect kids by helping people with pedophilia. The question was asked, was there sex or abuse in your childhood? 422 responded. 24% had been abused as a child. 8% had non-abuse. They had sexual contact with an adult that they didn't consider abuse. So that's a whole nother topic. Some children,
You're talking about 8% of the children?
8% of the virtuous pedophiles, when they were a child, had some sort of sexual contact with an adult that they enjoyed. And of course, society doesn't even want to address that. They don't want us to say, well, did you enjoy it? And then it's part of your fault or whatever. But the fact is that some children are into it. All children are curious about sexuality, nearly all, and they might interact with other children their age. A few of them are interested or pursue sexual activity of some kind with an adult. So 8% said no, 23% had sexual interaction with other children.
I think it adversely affects the child, whether the child enjoys it or not.
Yeah, I use that word loosely. I meant many of them now, looking back, say it did not adversely affect me. Whether I enjoyed it at the moment wasn't the question. The question is, looking back, did they feel that it was a problem? And they said no, it was not a problem. It's not abuse.
I
Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't.
careful and sensitive in regards to saying the child enjoyed it, or even I enjoyed it as when I was young, because the initial reaction to that behavior is not what society would expect it to be. Okay, it's new, it's taboo, it feels good, I'm being special, I'm feeling special, I'm being singled out. That does not necessarily mean that it would continue to be a, quote, enjoyable experience if it continued. So I don't know that it's really that simple as, well, I enjoyed it, so it was okay, or I didn't enjoy it. So
No,
it's
I'm
not
not, I don't mean to imply that, but Margot has a good take on that aspect of it. 25% said they didn't have any sexuality in their childhood, but they did have access to pornography. This was phrased a little different, but it's kind of a similar survey. In this case, 6% said they had adult interaction with an adult when they were a child. They had 23%, they had child on child, 36% said that. Now this is just have they had sexual contact with anybody in their life. So 36% said they had adult sexual interaction, 35% said they were virgins. Attitude, 63% said they would take a pill to get rid of pedophilia if such a thing were invented. Actually, there are many medications that do reduce the libido. Celexa is one that my physician prescribed for me when I was very anxious about being dismissed from Walden University. I found it reduced my libido and didn't impact our private sex life. The tablet doesn't never want me to talk about it in public, but anyway. I don't always take it. I would recommend primarily selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, reduce libido. There are some heavier duty ones. Depo-Provera is what they actually call chemical castration. So instead of cutting it off, they cut off the drive. We're talking about attitudes. So 84% say that of this survey said that Verped helps make them happy. 51% said Verped helps make them law-abiding. So the others, not that they broke the law, but maybe they felt they didn't need help to be law-abiding. Maybe the happy people didn't need help being happy either. 94% do admit that they look at children, like when they're out in public, they're girl watchers, boy watchers, whatever. So that's typical. As far as therapists, 54%, I don't see how many participated in this, but anyway, of those who responded, 54% said therapists helped, 9% said it didn't help, 13% they didn't need one, 13% said they do need one, 19% don't feel the need for one. Any questions?
In terms of those in Verped that talk about having no risk or low risk, so I come from an SOTP perspective where viewing oneself as low risk or no risk to reoffend is risky in itself.
I agree.
The idea is that because you're not vigilant, you're not aware. What is your, so you agree with that?
Yeah, that's kind of my response when people give a guy a bad time. There's a guy that goes by the name of Jay Bujan from Sweden, actually, that Ender and several of us thought was, you know, this guy's going to go down the tubes. He was always talking about falling in love with some little girl and his marriage was breaking up. And, boy, he seemed like the biggest risk. But as far as I know, out in the course of these 3 or 4 years that we've been on there, he has not offended against the child. So in one sense, he knew he was at risk, so maybe he was more careful. And maybe some of the other guys who were saying, oh, I'm no risk, that could be risky. So that's why, personally, I would rather admit that I'm in need. But that's a whole other part of my story. Just a guy in my life that I respected and admired a lot disappointed me, evidently sexually abused children 100 years ago.
Can I just speak up one thing about that? And just to kind of go off what you were saying there, in terms of the addiction model, and folks that believe they're over it often relapse because they, oh, I can go to the bar now, it doesn't matter,
Good 10 years. It's a good deal.
right? And so what I can say is just to, I know it's not quite the same, but for myself, like I went to Mexico and all the booze is paid for and it's all inclusive, they call it. And sometimes I would be sitting there eating my food and the guy would come and put the drink right down in front of me without me even saying a word. And I don't even speak Spanish, but I just have to let him know I don't drink, right? So I can say that I am literally not at risk. So I'm just saying that maybe at first, within a certain span of time, when you say I'm not at risk, maybe you're not. Maybe you are, sorry, but maybe eventually you get to a point where you're not. And I think that some people could be honest and say that they're not at risk. Maybe not the majority, but I think some people could do that. So
The important thing is that we're all different.
Right.
Virtuous pedophiles have different views, they'll argue sometimes, but frankly, I have never met a group that was so cohesive, even in the arguments. You know, they come together. I've been in religious arguments, I've been in political arguments, but these people, one thing you have to say, give to virtuous pedophiles, is that they know how to communicate differences of opinion without being mean about it. Now, if we have any other questions, we'll take them another minute, but my question for you is, I have some things to say about the Bennett manual. I don't necessarily want to do 2 in a row, so we have lunch in between. Then we also have Michael who's going to share a bit. The vote seems to be for Michael. You're on.
I'd like to hear the Bennett, but whatever.
We're going to hear the vote.
Before we go on, okay?
Okay. Very good.
Ultimately, as long as I learn about it, that's fine, whether it's now or half hour.
If the other choice is having Michael go first and then hearing the bet, that's fine. We just don't want to miss the bet.
Just go ahead, Gary.
Go
Go ahead, you're fine.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give him a little break so he can be all ready to go when he gets back. All right, Prevention Project Unfulfilled, I already told you, is the Dark Field in Germany. Premier program, I think they've been around about 10 years maybe. Right on my tongue, but they started doing what we're doing, and they don't have mandatory reporting in Germany. In fact, they're required not to report, but frankly, they say the same thing most people say here. If there's a guy who's actually abusing children, then they would do something about it. If they can't get him to stop right then, they would say something. They would report it. So BEDIT stands for Berlin Bisexuality Therapy. They spell it with a I. You like the Y? So it's really dissexuality. So it really means anything that's not good. But the problem with that is, I think they tried to do that because they didn't want to call it abnormal. Because what's normal? What is normal sexuality? We don't know. Nobody seems to know what normal sexuality is. But anyway, it just boils down to saying the same thing over again, that it's it's not healthy sexuality. You know, I mean, we could spend time on it. In fact, that'll be one of their things. They're actually in the 2013 edition, which they sent to me and allowed me to pass on to you. They have 17 different modules. It's my opinion that they have 12 modules. So in that big book that I sent some of you, all of you therapists that didn't get it, if you want it, put it on your evaluation sheet and I'll send it to you. So 12 modules. The first module has actually 5 sections. To me, this first part is so important and so detailed that I think each one of them is a module in itself. So whatever you want to call it. The first one is kind of organization. So this is typical to any treatment. You're going to get acquainted. You're going to kind of get a feel for where they want to go, talk about conditions of treatment. This is the orientation time, the time to establish rules, and especially if you're in a group format. Does anybody do groups? Do pedophilia groups? Okay. I really would love to see more groups, but it's so under the rug. Probably aren't enough.
We're trying.
We can try it.
We've been trying for years to get a group going. But
So in groups, you know, you have a little more specific rules about the group format, organizing that. Time to set personal goals, discuss the limits of confidentiality, talk about the stages of change, perhaps. So, I mean, that's like, it could take you a year or two on that, right? At least longer than just one session. The second part of the first 5 is on sexuality. So this is where you might discuss what sex is all about. Those who come from a Christian perspective, I like the psychologist Charles Witcheby that wrote a book, God Invented Sex. This is not something negative, not something bad. God gave it to us as a gift. Those who don't believe in intelligent design, atheists, agnostics, other people, think of evolution. What does the purpose of sexuality have in the evolution of our species? Well, first of all, to promulgate the species, right, to have children. So, you know, you can talk about, is sex only for children? Some people still think that, even in our day and age. Only have sex when you're going to have children. But is there more to it? And then we get to thinking about more and less. And I know when I get in discussions with the gay community, they don't want to be thought of as an alternative, second rate. You guys, you heterosexuals, you got the big chunk of the pie, but we just got a little bit. They want to be thought of as being on a par, equal. So not more or less, but my response is, all right, so some people are into an overnight stand. Tabitha talked about the different domains. Morally, some of us, who come from a Christian perspective, still think that it's not good to have an affair. Some people say, well, as long as it's 2 consenting adults, do whatever you want. Nobody is hurt. But then the wife comes home with some venereal diseases. They don't trust each other anymore. So is it more to have a committed relationship? Is that more or is that less than not having the committed? Okay, you can have sex, just hard, cold sex, no love, no commitment, no emotions in it, just nothing, just physical sex. You can do that with a prostitute. All right, that's this much. Is it more to add the emotional, the commitment, the love, the caring? Would anybody here say that's more? Nobody thinks it's more.
Yeah.
You don't get my question, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, if you have this little piece here, we call that just physical sex, with no love, no anything. We have this piece of pie over here that has the physical sex, but it also has love and commitment, a long-term monogamous relationship. Which one is more? More what?
more valuable.
More. That's why I would just say more. Yeah, maybe it is valuable to have an overnight stand with a prostitute because that's what you want. So you
But
think that's
we
more.
could be more. There could be more variety in the and we'd be talking about kink, right?
I withdraw. I withdraw my question. How do you talk about normal or abnormal, more value, less value, more important, more right, more?
One of the things that just jumped to mind for me was the difference between natural sex, as in like things that occur in nature, versus like kink, learned behavior, things that you see someone do, you think, oh, that might be fun, maybe I'd like to even try. You know, there isn't really very standard or strong definitions of each one. So I don't know, it's just something to think about.
Let me see if I can get through this.
Nikki, but enter the swamp.
You are going to talk about sexuality. You're going to look at the Bennett manual and you're going to piece together, I don't agree with everything in it, so you're going to piece together what you have, and you're not going to impose your values. So maybe you're a Christian, you're counseling an atheist, doesn't believe in Christian values, and so they base their values on what's harmful or not harmful, right?
Well, I would even disagree with you that there are Christian values.
Okay.
Because it depends what kind of Christian you are. So,
Right.
it's just all so, you have to work with people to figure out what's healthy sexuality for them, that it doesn't harm them, it doesn't harm other people. And then it's just a big bowl of cherries.
So you're going to talk about sexuality however you do it.
What's healthy for you? What's healthy for other people in your life? Yeah. I don't know that we can have any more black and white than that. I think if we do, then we start putting our value system on other people, and then there's no longer an integrity that they're coming with from inside to decide what's good for them.
And no matter how hard we try to get away from it, we still seem to be back to normal is what I think, and not what the other person thinks.
Yeah.
So whatever we define as normal, the other alternative is dissexuality. So this is from the Dunkelfeld. I assume they coined that word. I'd never heard it before, and anyway, they use it to describe. So you remember the list Tabitha had of pictures, images of children. The first one was clothed images. So to a pedophile, this kid, just a family picture, it looks sexy. They exclude the first two. They've got it on their list. This is dissexuality. This could be what they say is these first two could be problematic. So the second one was a little more specific, erotic poses. So girl's got leotards on, but she's got her legs spread apart. It looks very sexy. So that's not specifically. And nude pictures. Nudity is not illegal. Nude colonies or pictures of nudes. The local Cupid down at the courthouse, they haven't shot him out of the water yet. They probably will. Anyway, then it gets on down where we all would agree that they're a problem. So whatever you want to call it, this is good, this is bad, this is normal, this is abnormal, this is on this side, this is. So we've got the big one that Tabitha hinted at is masturbation. So the question, not just masturbation per se, sometimes Christians don't think that would be inappropriate, or they used to call it self-abuse. The issue more specifically is, should pedophiles masturbate to fantasies involving children? We'll come to that again maybe later. Anyway, whatever dissexuality is, you're going to talk about that. You're going to talk about risk factors. Now, if you want, and if we have time, I will go through the SARA, which is something that we designed. Me, all right, Tabitha leaves herself out. From you folks, the sex offender treatment programs, and the recidivism rates, what factors make a person more apt to recidivate. So we don't know if those apply to a first-time offense. We'll talk about those. But in any case, whether you use the SARA or something else, you're going to talk about risk factors, and you are going to present the medical options. Not everybody wants or needs chemical castration or even SSRIs, but you're going to put that out there on the table. You're going to tell them, if you want, these are things that are available, even for a non-offending pedophile. Maybe struggling, he's single, his risk is a little higher, he or she feels more vulnerable. Now, what they call Module 2. So I'll try to move along faster thanks to my wife. Acceptance. To me, this is the most important thing that happens on VERPED. Everybody, nearly everybody that comes to VERPED, sighs and cries, oh, I hate myself, everybody hates me, I'm feeling so depressed. Suicidal. And they're on there, and they find, what's the first thing you find? There's 1,800 other people on here struggling with the same. I'm not alone. Maybe there is hope. Maybe there's help for me. And so very soon they come to accept it. Now, nobody says you need to accept yourself. Well, maybe you do so once in a while. It just happens. We come to some sort of self-acceptance, and you can argue with the the technical terms, help me, I'm getting old. That means you're accepted as part of what you are in the DSM-5. All you mental health professionals, you don't know what I'm talking about.
Egocentric?
Egosyntonic or egodystonic. Ego is yourself, so dystonic. Yeah, in this way, but I really wish I weren't egosyntonic. Actually, some of these pedophiles would say, hey, I'm glad I'm a pedophile. It makes me good with kids, and all my family says, oh, you're so good with kids. They accept it. They don't want to act on it. They make a difference between accepting it as destigmatizing the attraction versus acting on it. All right, so that's acceptance, and to me, that's your most important work. Anybody comes to you, help them accept the fact. The bad news is you can't do anything about it. There is no cure for pedophilia. You can't change your sexual orientation. I've tried for 50 years. Pray about it. Pray the gay away, right? That should work. Those of you that are Christians, pray it away. Pray the pedophilia away. Hey, I've prayed for 50 years and that hasn't changed me yet. So pray that you won't act on it. Anyway, acceptance, motivation is kind of the second part of this module 2. Motivation might be negative, fear of prison, the legal difficulties. I think Tabitha had some on that. Things that could happen, potential loss of relationship, feelings of guilt and shame. Desire not to harm a child is the most important one. So, talk about motivation. The next one is perceptions, and this is your typical cognitive behavioral therapy. I see some children playing over on the merry-go-round, and the little girl looks over at me. What am I thinking she sees? Oh, she wants to talk to me. She's interested in me. I don't think, oh, she wants to go to bed with me right now. But, she wants to interact. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she's looking over at me thinking, oh, a stranger over there, weird guy. So, am I right on what you folks do that do this kind of treatment? Cognitive behavioral therapy, we have a lot of cognitive distortions, faulty thinking, thinking errors, you call it what you want. Do any of you have any thinking errors?
Yes.
So maybe the mental health professionals need some cognitive restructuring as well, right? So the first one is, don't think that we're all ticking time bombs, waiting, just trying to grab the next child that comes along. We're trying not to. Okay, pedophiles often do experience misperceptions. Before we get to this one, Dunkelfeld introduces the term, and I don't think I haven't had this one, amicable sexual relationships. When I was talking about, does it feel good to, well, yeah, they got turned on. Well, does that mean it's okay? No, it's not okay, because they got physically aroused. Women, or boys and girls as well, can get physically aroused, have an orgasm, 8, 9 years old. That can happen. Dunkelfeld introduces this term amicable to suggest that there was no force or coercion involved. Our society, the legal system says it's statutory rape. They're under 18, they cannot consent. Well, how do you describe a relationship, an ongoing romantic and sexual relationship between the 18-year-old and the 17-year-old? They were both 17 one day, and then he turned 18, and now suddenly it's different, right? Before it was okay, now it's not okay. Well, it's illegal. It's rape. Some people say, well, you're minimizing rape. No, I'm not minimizing rape. You guys are, because you have all this statutory rape and this whole thing about consent. A guy doesn't know all the time if his girlfriend is consenting. She said yes yesterday, and then we get under the influence of alcohol. Well, don't drink then. Don't go get drunk if you're going to be together with this guy. He might want to have sex with you, and then suddenly it becomes rape. So I agree.
He's on the registry as a sex offender for the rest of his life.
I do agree that rape is not good, but I think it's minimizing those who are really raped, to lump it all together and say that that is just as bad because you both happen to be drunk, well, or because one guy, one partner turned 18 before the other one, suddenly it reduces their ability to consent. If they can't consent when they're under 18, why do we allow them to have sex when they're 13? Well,
In some states they don't. I think it's Indiana, there's a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old.
I was going to say I'll take that back because I don't think we had put 13-year-olds. And in Minnesota, there was a kid who committed a sexual offense when he was an adolescent, and he's still in this, what they call, sexual violent predator program. So that's a prison. No, they don't call it a prison, they call it therapy, but it's got barbed wire, razor wire around it, and it sure looks like a prison to me. But the judge has decided that that was not totally legal to put people in prison, not for something they have done, but because we think they might do something at some time in the future. You heard of that? So there are, today, there are thousands of Americans who are incarcerated for something they might do. Only pedophiles, not murderers, not terrorists, but only pedophiles. Now the people who run the system aren't all bad. Don't bash the people. They're trying to do their best. And I've met some of them personally. I met the woman who works at the San Juan Islands. And they're really good people. They're trying to help. And they would like to see the system change. But that's the way the system is now. Anyway, I got off. Let's get back. I promise you I go faster. So amicable sexual relationships, emotions, feelings, fantasies, and behaviors. What's that about? All right. We won't solve it. Should I get our buttons and vote on it? I'm just curious. How many of you, those who are treatment providers, how many of you still use aversion therapy and you try to get the client to not fantasize about children? Okay. I'm not putting that down, but I'm not sure if it works. Have you been successful? Have you changed people's sexual orientation so they now are attracted to adults?
I don't think you use aversion to change somebody's sexual orientation. That's, I mean, at least that's my understanding of it. It's a tool to use if you're feeling really aroused and you want to have something, a tool for tapping down the arousal because it's getting to be difficult to deal with.
All right.
I mean, the idea that you can change somebody's sexual arousal or template is, you know, that's a dead end.
I'll buy into that. I like that response.
We're just a little confusion here. Because my thought was, for example, if a man is having a sexual thought involving children, to switch that, assuming that man is also attracted to adults, and to instead focus your your fantasies on adults in that moment. So would that sort of fall into the same category?
Yes, I paid $200 to attend Gene Abel's session on it at the ASA conference in Denver. And that's basically what he was teaching. Several different ways to do it. One was the typical aversion therapy where you use ammonia, smell ammonia when you're attracted to, turned on by a kid. What Dunkelfeld does is it provides 3 levels. I had, not that I'm smarter than Dunkelfeld, but I had come to the same conclusion. We already got the fact that there's attraction and action, right? Here's attraction. You didn't choose it. You can't change it. You can't control it, really. Here's action. You are responsible for your behavior, your action. What lies in between those two? That begins with A. I like words that start the same. So I see in the middle there arousal. So you are right that aversion therapy, smelling ammonia, snapping a rubber band. We got some rubber bands for you. It might help to modify the arousal pattern, but it doesn't change the orientation.
How about we use the word reduce instead of change?
reduce, okay?
Because sometimes if you're dealing with somebody who is preoccupied and is having difficulty dealing with that preoccupation, a little aversion imagery or a sharp kick in the butt may not be a bad thing.
So Dunkelfeld helps to differentiate between fantasies and behavior, and whether or not the two are connected. There's science on both sides, and some people quote the Diamond study, is it, that viewing child pornography actually is less, there's less real action in countries where they allowed child pornography, or when they changed it, it would reduce that. So the question is that that the client has to settle. You can't impose your values on them. They're going to think what they're going to think. They're going to do what they're going to do. But you can help them to decide, does fantasizing about a child, an imaginary child, help you not to act out with a real child? A lot of the virtuous pedophiles say they fantasize about imaginary children, avatar, a simulated, and that's why they would like to see that legalized. Computer-drawn images that aren't too lifelike. But in particular, many of them try to avoid fantasies involving a child, a real child that they know in real life. I just personally try to avoid fantasies involving children, but I'm not 100% successful. So just to be honest with you, I struggle with that. Whether or not it helps avoid it in real life, I don't know. Unless you have more questions on that. Empathy and perspective for potential victims. That's kind of, telling stories about people who've been abused and learning to sympathize. It's easier for a pedophile to identify, empathize with a stranger, another person, other than the child they're attracted to. It's very difficult for a pedophile, and I'm being honest about myself, it's difficult for me to think that, oh, I'm going to harm this child. I mean, intellectually, I get it, I know that. But emotionally, it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm about to, stab this little girl with a knife. It feels like, yeah, I'm attracted. I want to love her. I think I love her. I think I care about her. So empathy and perspective, curriculum, I don't know why they use that word. Maybe it's a German thing, but curriculum vitae, Tabitha likes to use that about her resume. That's what I used to call it. So it's kind of the story of your life. And along with that is what they call schemas. Some of you probably heard that word, you therapists. So it's kind of repeating things that happen in your life. So this would be a time for going through the client's story. What repeated themes do you see popping out in your history, sharing your life story? Coping mechanism is probably one of the important ones. And again, it kind of ties in with masturbation. Do you masturbate to ease the tension, really reduce the sexual tension, or does it make you more apt to act out? What can you do? So there was a researcher by the name of Karen Friedman up in Vancouver. You've always heard of Karen Friedman's work? She studied, I think it was 9 pedophiles. The bottom line is she came to the conclusion, she's not a pedophile, but she came to the conclusion that we, society, should allow pedophiles the privilege, the respectability to masturbate to fantasies involving children, that we shouldn't put them down or try to change that. And she disagrees a little bit with some of the other professionals, James Cantor, some of the others. So the professionals don't all agree on this subject, whether or not.
I think there has to be a distinction between, individuals who have attraction exclusively to children, right? Because
you would cut them a little more slack?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, what
else are they going to do?
What else are they going to do, right? I mean, abstinence only goes so far, in my opinion.
And maybe it's the lesser of the two evils. It's better for them to masturbate to a fantasy than to act out in real life.
Absolutely.
Now, I'll just be upfront with you. I come from a conservative Christian perspective, and I'm kind of opposed to a gay lifestyle, I'm not supposed to use that word lifestyle. How are we supposed to say it? To acting on the gay attraction, okay? But there was a kid on Verped, a young man, who I met in real life, happens to live here in the state of Oregon, but anyway, he said he was exclusive. So I cut him some slack, and that very day that we met him, which was a little interesting because that was the same day that we met the girl who had made these false allegations against me. She wanted to see us. We got together with her. Anyway, this guy was going to Chicago, going to another state to meet another guy from Verpad, and they met and hit up on some kind of a relationship. What was I going to do? Tell him, no, don't do that? So even though intellectually, spiritually, I'm opposed to being gay, I supported him, encouraged him to develop whatever kind of relationship. I don't know if it'll be a sexual relationship or a romantic relationship, but the guy moved out. They're living together in Portland. Yeah, not Portland, but Oregon, let's say. So to me, it's better. It's the lesser of two things that I would personally am not into. But again, I don't impose my values on other people. So I respect the fact that it was helpful to him. So with exclusives, I would help them to avoid problems. Social relationships. So many society and many therapists even think or have a misperception, a cognitive distortion, that all pedophiles have a hard time with regular adult relationships. Is that true? Obviously not. I've been happily married, unhappily married sometimes. Been through more than one marriage. I'm embarrassed, ashamed to admit this is not my first marriage, but thankful God gave us a second chance. And so sometimes we do need to work on those relationships. We're struggling in our marriage. I admit that on Virtuous Pedophiles. My, what support those guys gave me. They saved our marriage. So they're able to think about how do relationships work? Why I go out and it just doesn't seem. Well, you can help them learn how to establish. Maybe they're not going to get married. Maybe they are exclusive. Maybe they could still have friends. Don't worry about the sex and the marriage part. Let's start with just developing some friendships.
Maybe they're exclusive and we get married anyway. I don't discount that possibility for my life. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm seeing a thread on Verpad. Oh, I'm going to be alone and childless the rest of my life because I'm exclusive. You don't know that. We don't know what's going to happen. There is no reason why I can't have a sexless marriage. There is no reason why I cannot engage in a marriage and engage in sex, have the spirit of giving instead of receiving, just by being grateful that person is there for me. I mean, there are too many,
There's companion marriages all over the place. There's lots of people marriages when nobody has
Some by choice and some not, right? Yeah.
There's paraplegics that get married all the time.
Yeah.
So
So
I
here's
would not encourage an exclusive, and in fact, I commented, basically said the very same thing you just said to you on a thread. Of course, they're ignoring it. Well, I'm sorry they're ignoring it because who knows what they're missing out on life.
Yes. So here's another tough one. What about kids, children? Should a pedophile be banned from ever having anything to do with children again? So
I do not ban myself from having anything to do with children, period. That is still in an indecision phase with me, but I will not cohabitate with a child, so in my particular situation, it would have to be a childless environment.
Again, I think it's based on individual situation. Can we try and make everything so one size fits all? You have to be smart enough to realize what your weaknesses are and not allow yourself to go there, And sometimes you need a period of time out.
So should I take this call probably from a Virtuous Pedophile? I could put him on mine and we could all counsel together. Okay, so children. I hate to put anybody on the spot, but what is the official stance? Simona is a Seventh-day Adventist, and she is in charge of risk management here in Oregon, so she's the one that is concerned about how we solve this problem. Would you allow now let's leave out the sex offenders. We understand sex offenders sometimes are forbidden by the PO, by the probation officer. But if you knew that I was a pedophile, would you allow me to come to camp meeting?
Yes.
Good.
We
Camp meeting.
have a religious every
Just a
year.
couple
have
miles down the road here, there's like a big, 100 acres of campground. The Seventh Adventist Church owns it, they're trying to sell it 2 or 3 times.
And we have a
Anyway,
big group camper. We
like
have
10,000 people come together.
Tons
and
of
they're on
kids.
If we would probably, if depending on your level, we would probably want to make sure that you yourself had a protection plan for yourself set up.
Yes.
If we saw you over by the kids' tent taking pictures, we might go talk to you and say, "This, you're out of bounds here," you know, because our top priority is protecting the children, right? At the same time, respecting you as a person.
Very good, thank you. I'm very relieved.
Can I just interrupt for a
Yes.
moment? This is someone who called you. They would like to be able to listen in to anything.
Yes.
Indiana RSOL on YouTube.
Can they do live streaming? Maybe you can take the phone to him. If not, I don't mind if they listen in, if anybody else.
I don't know how well they'll hear it.
The other tough question, and I respect you for this question, I don't have the answer for you. What if I fail? What if they allow me to
Just do a search.
do presentations like this in the church, in a church setting? You know, we can say, oh, church, these are religious people, they don't have problems with abuse, but everywhere I go. So do you think that the church would be in legal trouble if they allowed me to teach this class, allowed us to have something like this, and then one of the people went out and abused the child? Am I reflecting the question?
Yes, I think so, and I think from the religious perspective is if that person,
Try to listen and see if you can hear.
the thing religious groups have issues with
Yes.
is the child
You'll probably be able to hear
victim
me.
suing the church
I'll just.
for allowing the perpetrator to be on the church grounds. And so the liability of having this sort of discussion, an attorney gets a hold of that. We have several attorneys in Portland and Salem area that advertise for people who have been victims with religious backgrounds so that they can sue those religious backgrounds. And that is so unfortunate because it affects everybody. It affects the victim and it affects the perpetrators because it doesn't make churches a safe place for anybody. And so we do have to legally think about that. There's no way to get around it. Otherwise, all the religious organizations will be out of business. Well, not out of business, but out of being able to conduct
Are you able to hear what she was saying?
organizational.
Okay, I'll keep you on.
Yeah, I've had ministers comment to me, you wouldn't believe the liability.
Okay.
That seems to be the bottom line.
And that's sad, but you know, millions and millions of dollars are going, you know, that we could be using for different things. And it's unfortunate on both sides.
Did you have that?
Well, this is what the work I used to do, which is to, in a sense, protect the institution. And the institution has to take measures to protect the children, protect everybody, assuming that it does not know who the perpetrators will be, assuming a number of other unforeseeable things. So a good prevention program makes sure that children are never alone with an adult except their parent, that you don't have rooms without windows, you don't have this and that. Camp situations get very, very difficult, and it has to be done. So
Absolutely.
it's a bit of a different question that we're dealing with here today, because it's coming from the institutional point of view. And abuse of children by pedophilia is not the only hazard out there.
Absolutely
So,
not.
yeah, so it's an institutional problem.
Right.
I think what you need to remember, or what people need to remember though, I mean, I have no problem with the protection plan. In fact, I'm an offender and I had protection plans or have protection plans for the churches that I attend. The problem is when restrictions get imposed upon you without your input. Because you can impose all these restrictions you want, but if it doesn't happen to meet my particular situation, it's really irrelevant, and it's stupid because it's not addressing what I have an issue with. So I think the protection plan has to address the specific need of the person that's involved, and not just throwing out, well, I think we ought to have them stay away from all kids, or they can't walk past the primary area, or they can't whatever.
I think it's apples and oranges, because from the institution's point of view, you have to assume you don't know who these people are.
What I'm saying is you need to include these people in the discussion.
Okay.
Thank you both for the input. I think on virtuous pedophiles, the guys have different opinions. Some don't ever want to be around children. They self-restrain, keep themselves from being around children. Others find that that actually helps. That's where I'm at. I find it helps because if I'm never around children, then all of a sudden I'm around a child. It's like being in prison for 50 years, and then suddenly you're out and you're desperate for a woman or whatever. So to me, it helps reduce that tension, and it also helps to see the children as real people, instead of just as objects, sex objects. So moving on, I'm going to wrap it up, and then Michael, if you can get ready, we'll put you right on. Unless we need a break. Dunkelfeld devotes a whole nother model to helping develop intimacy and trust in non-sexual relationships. So at work, whatever, learning to get along with people. Planning the future and protective measures, the last two really apply more, I think they'd apply more to an offender. How are you going to protect yourself? Not sure how you develop a protective plan. If you've never done anything, how you reduce recidivism, reduce the chances. The thing that I do is go through the SARA, the Sexual Abuse Risk Assessment, not so much to find a final number of their risk, but to help them identify the areas that they could change. So being a male is one of the high risk factors. Can't change that very easily. But being around kids, working with children that you're sexually attracted to, that's something you probably do something about. So they find the areas that they can change. Since non-offending pedophiles are not required to be in therapy with you folks, it's very important, it's imperative that you allow them to choose. If I were coming to you and you said, you can't be around kids, I just react to that, brace myself and resist it. So you can talk about it, you can discuss with them what would be best for them. So the whole thing is planning with them, from the beginning to the end, developing the plan, setting goals. If they want to change their sexual orientation, well, try. No, don't try. So work with them. The same with things like alcohol and pornography. My father was an alcoholic. He drove a bakery route from here out to Canby about the time I was born. Probably you folks remember the jelly rolls he used to bring home to us. Oh, they were so good. He brought my half-brother into school here at the Rivergate School, and he'd drive home sometimes drunk. One time he hit a tree, ran into a tree. So I'm totally opposed to alcohol. My kids drink a little bit. It bothers me because I wish they would drink. Oh, we're just social drinkers, and then their marriage falls apart, and I'm thinking, he's blaming her for the alcohol she drinks. She's blaming him for how much he drinks. They both, they do things that they wouldn't. They get mad at each other. They lose control when they're under the influence. So am I going to go tell everybody not to drink? No, but if they have high risk, avoid the alcohol or drugs, any mind-altering drugs. Pornography, am I going to tell people to quit pornography altogether? No, but if that's their problem, if that's where their struggle is, then they need to be careful. All right, I need to stop. If you want to hear more from me again, we can. Otherwise, we're going to let Michael do the talking.